Welcome everybody to our CapTech LinkedIn Live. Today we have Dr. Nikki Robinson, who is Assistant Director for Capital Tech's Center in Women in Cyber, and Professor Mary Aiken, who is the Department Chair for Cyberpsychology here at Capital Tech. And so today we want to highlight our Center for Women in Cyber. And as we mentioned in the notes that advertise it, it goes everything from cybersecurity to cyberpsychology and all inclusive under cyber. And we hope to generate interest for more women to be involved in the cyber area. It's a huge area, a huge growing area. Dr. Robinson and Dr. Aiken are leaders in the cyber area, and I will turn it over to Dr. Robinson to talk a little bit about the center.
Yeah, thank you, Dr. Sims. I know for me, getting involved in this was a really cool opportunity because back when I was trying to decide on a career, one, I didn't know IT was a thing, and I didn't know if cybersecurity was a potential career route. And I got into IT. I was in IT for a while, and then I sort of stumbled across cybersecurity while being in IT, and I was like, oh, this could be really cool. And then seeing that, there still weren't a ton of women in cybersecurity, just like I didn't come across a lot of women in IT. And so having the opportunity to work with the Center for Women in Cyber is an opportunity to talk about career pathing in cybersecurity, and not just for entry level, but how do we get more female leaders in cybersecurity as well? So how do we bring more people in? And then how do we teach leadership skills to help all of the women in cyber that are in the field and doing amazing things to help elevate to leadership. And so it's a great opportunity for not just, young women who are thinking about a career in cyber, but also for career switchers. Anyone who's in a different field, maybe it's finance or business, and maybe they're thinking about a career in cyber. And so it's a great opportunity to build a network and to talk about all the opportunities in cybersecurity.
Well, I will pull up the website here quickly so everybody can see it in the background. So I'm just going to scroll down the page here. As we go down, there is a list of activities and events and past events that you can rewatch. Anything you want to bring up about the events and upcoming events?
We are sort of planning our next events for the end of the year, 2023. We're talking about the Cybersecurity Leadership Series webinars, where we're hoping to cover lots of different leadership topics. So everything from, the technical skills to empathy, communications, all of those other great sort of skills that you need to get into cybersecurity leadership. And then, of course, talking about what we're going to do next year. So I think we're going to talk more about, maybe doing 1-day conferences or 3-day conferences. We're not sure yet, but we have a lot planned for the next year.
Yeah, there's a continual programming going on. The Center for Women in Cyber meet regularly every couple of weeks so that they can plan out the year. A lot of stuff that's virtual that you can attend from anywhere in the world. Let's move over to Dr. Aiken, talk a little bit about cyberpsychology. I know that's a newer field under cybersecurity that folks may not be aware of. And could you talk a little bit about how you see it that fits in the whole world that is cyber?
Sure, Dr. Sims. So cyberpsychology is the study of the impact of technology on human behavior. The discipline was considered emerging, and it's now an established discipline, about 20 years old. And effectively, at CapTech, we have one of the first full PhDs available in cyberpsychology online. We also have a PhD in forensic cyberpsychology. Forensic cyberpsychology is a subtopic under cyberpsychology. And effectively, it's the study of criminal and abnormal and harmful behavior online. And it's my specialist area. I'm also a professor of forensic cyberpsychology. And unfortunately, I'm kept pretty busy in terms of my work with Interpol and Europol worldwide in addressing these harmful and criminal behaviors. So if we think about cyber psychology, some of the key research areas for those of you who are interested in obtaining a higher degree, and we were just talking there about how to elevate to leadership and excellence, and one of the ways is to upskill academically. One of the ways for women to get ahead in industry and to get ahead with their careers is to have better and more relevant qualifications. And I think in this day and age, you couldn't get a qualification that is more relevant than cyber psychology or forensic cyber psychology. We also offers masters by research in both of those topics and available online, looking at everything from human factors in infosec and cybersecurity. You can go into research areas in terms of, say, social technologies. You can look at e-commerce. You can consider developmental cyber psychology, and these are all sort of sub areas. I've published in areas such as cyberchondria, which is in the area of health psychology. We've got online safety technologies, and then the psychology of virtual reality and artificial intelligence. So as I say, I've been a researcher and an academic in this field for 20 years. And to my delight, IARPA, which is the Office of the Director of National Intelligence, their Intelligence Advanced Research Projects activity, which is IARPA, have now recognized the importance of cyber psychology, and they recently launched a program called Rescind, which is reimagining security with cyber psychology informed network defenses. And effectively, this is looking at how we can augment traditional cyber defenses to sort of rebalance the asymmetry of cyber defense by imposing what IARPA describe as a cyber penalty on attackers and thwarting cyber attacks. So this is very exciting because it's the crossover between cyber behavioral science and cybersecurity. And what I'll do is, when we're finished this short discussion, I'll post some links to some recent papers that I think might help inspire some of our listeners, our viewers, and especially some of the women who have tuned in, to actually think about how they might gain a higher degree, master's or doctoral level, in cyber psychology, and how they could use this to advance their own career. So one of the papers is a recent publication and 3-year research project that I was involved in, which was considered human and technical drivers of cybercrime. And our publication, one of the publications, is Conceptualizing Cybercrime, Definitions, Typologies, and Taxonomies. And a review of a massive review of the literature revealed that there was no agreed academic definition of cybercrime. Well, there's a surprise. Then also publications regarding human and technical drivers of cybercrime. And then 2 of our doctoral students have recently published. Marshall Rich has published a great paper on integrating digital forensic analysis to detect and mitigate adversarial behavioral patterns. And Melissa Martinet has published a comprehensive framework for cyber behavioral analysis based on a systematic review of cyber profiling literature. Fascinating paper. So back over to you, Dr. Sims.
Well, thank you. So let's move back to Dr. Robinson, who has not only 1 PhD, but 2 PhDs, one in cybersecurity and one in human factors. So from that end, on that side, can you kind of highlight the areas that you think would be of interest for folks to get into?
Yeah, absolutely. When I was looking into, I knew I wanted the DSC in cybersecurity to, hone some of the research that I was doing around vulnerability scoring and chaining. And by doing that research, really what I found was the language and terminology that I was using to the participants wasn't an industry standard. And so then I started saying, well, how do we as humans experience cybersecurity? How do we understand the language that we use? And that was one of the reasons why I wanted to do human factors, and look into how security professionals and IT professionals actually work in cybersecurity. What does the work actually look like? How do we feel about the work that we do? so taking some of those skills from human factors, which is really this really lovely combination of engineering and psychology and design, and pulling a lot of those known practices, known engineering sort of skills, and pulling that into cybersecurity to help, really communicate better between groups. So, from cybersecurity side, we have pretty typical job roles like security analyst, security engineers, DevSecOps. We have a lot of those sort of typical job roles, but there are a lot of other roles in cybersecurity that sort of bridge that gap between cyber and psychology and engineering. Things like forensics, like Dr. Aiken was talking about. There's a lot in digital forensics that is really interesting to understand human behavior, how they access systems, how they use systems. Incident response, I think, is another really interesting part of cybersecurity where, you're not just looking at the technical components of what happened, but to understand how, an attacker might operate. How would they be thinking through a system? What are they interested in looking at? What types of systems are they accessing? And so there's a lot of roles in cybersecurity that do integrate, really well-known psychological concepts, behavioral analysis techniques into cybersecurity. So whether it's a security analyst or a security engineer, there's a lot of ways to integrate those other really cool fields like psychology and forensics into what we're doing in cybersecurity.
Both great areas, and you have two of the experts here if you want to add any questions. They both are authors and written many papers, so now's the time to ask some questions. I see a comment over here. I'm just going to click on it. We get some kudos out here. Amanda Fetch giving kudos. There is a question on will this be saved? Yes. So if you have this on LinkedIn, it automatically gets uploaded, but it will be available on YouTube later on. So I'll put a link in the comment section. And you heard from Dr. Aiken, who's going to put some links about cybersecurity here as well.
And I just wanted to make one comment. Dr. Robinson was talking about, like, that overlap between cybersecurity and psychology. I think what's really interesting is there's the evolution of a whole new sector, which I've been very involved with, which started in the UK, and now we have a sector in the US, and it's the online safety technology sector, or as we call it, safety tech. So we have health tech, fintech, and safety tech. And this is a sector dedicated to providing technology solutions to technology facilitated criminal and harmful behavior. And, people say, well, okay, safety tech falls under the broad area of cyber safety, but what's the difference between cyber safety and cybersecurity? Cybersecurity protects your data, your systems, and your networks. It does not protect what it is to be human online. And this is a fascinating new area of study, which IARPA is very much tapping into. Your data is never going to feel the need for revenge. Your data is never going to suffer from low self-esteem. So it's really important. We want systems that are robust, resilient, safe, and secure, but we also need the humans who operate and use those systems to be psychologically robust, resilient, safe, and secure.
Yeah, could you also, Dr. Aiken, I know you talked about cybersecurity and forensic a little bit, because we do offer both degree programs, forensic cybersecurity and psychology. Just for those that are interested in the difference, could you just highlight again if you choose one or two of the other masters or PhD, which way you'd be looking at cybersecurity?
Sure. Cybersecurity, your research areas could be very broad, including areas like, say, developmental cyberpsychology, or focusing on social tech, which is, social media and social technologies. Forensic cyberpsychology has a much greater focus on criminal behavior. And so if that's your interest in terms of, in terms of focusing on cybercrime, in terms of focusing on that overlap in terms of cybersecurity threats and attacks, then I think that, if that's your interest, I would be encouraging you to pursue the forensic route. If you've got a key interest in cybercrime, it's my favorite area.
Oh, I think you might be muted, Dr. Sims.
Sorry about that. We have a question here. What kind of background is necessary to start out in cyber? A pure cyber degree, or you mentioned psychology. Could one who went to school for psych transition over to cyber without traditional tech skills?
Okay, that's a really good question. And I often get asked this, and that's the beauty of cyber psychology, is that it's like an interdisciplinary endeavor at a higher level degree. So we can have people who've got a great background in social and behavioral sciences at an undergraduate level deciding to do their higher degree. And when they do the higher degree, then they have to upskill on their technological knowledge and combine that with their behavioral science knowledge. And then if you switch it around the other way, we have a lot of applicants to our program who have in-depth technical knowledge, either in digital forensics or in cybersecurity or in IT, who are fascinated by the behavioral science aspect. But this isn't traditional psychology. The traditional psychology is very much bound in a real world context. That's where the studies have been carried out. That's where they've been, validated. We're now in this new domain of cyber psychology. We're talking about human behavior mediated by technology. And the real challenge there is to scientifically adapt existing behavioral scientific theories, or to develop new ones that account for the behavior. If you fundamentally consider that in cyber psychology, we conceptualize what we're doing now, this isn't transactional. We've entered into a powerful psychological domain, and that's the domain of cyberspace. And human behavior changes in that domain. You have effects such as online disinhibition. You have the power of anonymity. You have these behavioral drivers. And that's the exciting part for cyber psychology. I studied psychology first back in the 80s, and all the landmark studies had been done. And all of a sudden, for me, psychology got really interesting again when it came to thinking about behavior online, and to the ability to sort of, to do cutting edge research and put down a stake in this new scientific frontier. An exciting time.
Yeah, and that kind of falls in line with the next question here. Dr. Aiken, it says, looking forward to learning how to combine social engineering and cyber psychology for research.
Yeah, that's super cool. And that's a really, here's the thing, 85 to 95% of cyber attacks are facilitated through or mediated by social engineering. And social engineering has almost nothing to do with the technology and everything to do with psychology and cyber psychology specifically. So, we've had 50 or 60 years of cybersecurity, and the problems have not gone away. And that's really has, I suppose, the gap in the knowledge is actually understanding human behavior manifesting in cyber context, both user behavior, those who operate the systems, and those who seek to attack or to abuse systems, the range of threat actors manifesting in cyber contexts.
And here's one for Nikki. Has there been much research on cyber resiliency, sustaining the cyber warriors who are online fighting the cyber war?
Yes, absolutely. There's a lot of research in both ways. So cyber resiliency can be seen as system resiliency or human resiliency. So how do our cyber operators live and deal with burnout, stress, decision fatigue? There's a lot of psychological studies that are out right now. There's some on eye tracking. How do you determine you know, how someone is looking at alerts. Are they getting alert fatigue for our SOC analysts? So yes, there is quite a bit of research out there, I would say, on identifying burnout, stress, frustration in the cybersecurity field. What I would say is still sort of emerging is how do we deal with that? You know, there's a lot of research that shows that yes, people are getting burnout. Yes, they're frustrated and stressed out because they have highly repetitive jobs. You know, they're just constantly looking at alerts, taking in this information, making decisions all the time. So there's still a lot of work to be done, I think, on coming up with a really good solution. There's some out there, right? You know, around tooling. And I think the cyber resiliency piece is really that combination of what type of tooling are we using and how are we supporting our security operators in a human, empathetic way.
And I think there's one of our doctoral students, Eric Myers, is actually doing his PhD in this exact area in cyberpsychology. And one of the things that the IARPA project is considering, we can consider that burnout as a negative, but that can also be used to counterattack. So if you think about a cyber attacker and where their psychological vulnerability lies, then that can also be a way of, a form of active defense when you target that vulnerability.
Excellent. See, we have a few other comments.
Yeah, this cognitive burnout. So Dr. Calvin Nobles, who did the PhD in human factors, he was sort of my predecessor in the PhD in human factors space. And he's one of those people I talk to all the time about security and human factors. And he wrote a really great paper on security fatigue. He was talking about, the big picture of alert fatigue, decision fatigue, all these components that we experience, but we don't experience them in silos. We experience them all within a day. And so he wrote this really great paper on security fatigue that I can link after the webinar as well.
Excellent. This one I think is for Dr. Aiken, the hackable human.
In what context?
Yeah, I think it's interesting because we were talking about social engineering. There's this understanding social engineering so we can prevent attacks, again, in a very technical way, right? Like what security mitigations do we put in place to protect against social engineering and phishing and spear phishing and business email compromise, all of those types of attacks. But, how do we also help our users? How do we make it easier for them, versus, phishing training once a year? How can we train really good habits and help them? In a positive way.
And I think the problem about phishing training is that, increasingly employees don't like being considered as lab rats, whereby they're being, spammed with attempted, phishing attempts, and then they get a metaphorical slap on the wrist and have to retrain. I think that, we need increasing sophistication in terms of how we identify those human psychological attack vectors, and then how we seek to address them. And I think that's where cyberpsychology in general and forensic specifically can certainly be deployed.
Yeah, it's interesting you bring that up because so a lot of my research has been focused around vulnerability chaining, and a lot of that is very technical controls, right? Specific CVE IDs, specific attack vectors, right? Yeah. But vulnerability chaining, as the definition, doesn't cover how the human interacts to be able to, set off a vulnerability, which is, to me, is part of the vulnerability chain. So I think we need some updated language in cybersecurity too.
Yeah, and I think it's the combination. I think these two disciplines are absolutely complementary. If you can protect the data, the systems, the networks, and you can protect the humans who operate and use those systems, that's what delivers on 360 resilience. factoring the human into the cybersecurity equation. And I think that's where the science of cyberpsychology can actually help to design protocols, to establish methodologies, to understand the behavior, to mitigate, to triage, to avert, to do everything that's necessary. Here's a
Yes,
question.
this question was related to cyberspsychology. Any guidance on what type of research would you be able to perform in terms of qualitative, quantitative?
I think that it depends whether you're doing a master's or a PhD. Often mixed methods is good, where you're doing some qual and some quan, particularly when you're dealing in a new discipline, where some of the work is exploratory. So I think it's a combination of what is your preference, what's the research area that you want to engage in, and then what is the best method to actually to extrapolate, to actually to generate the data and extrapolate and analyze the data. So I think both can work, but ideally mixed methods can add more value.
Mm-hmm. We'll take one last question here. I believe, let's see. I'm currently studying for my CISSP and have a master's in cyber. I'm interested in cyber warfare, disinformation, cybercrime. My experience has been limited to serving in the United States Air Force and Baltimore Police. Would cyber psychology or forensic cyber be more relevant to my skill set?
So I wanted to, but before I let, I'm sure Dr. Aiken has some good thoughts on this too, but don't limit yourself to, if you say that you're going to go with cyber psychology, that doesn't mean that you are, stuck in pigeonholed into cyber psychology. Your topic can be really about your expertise. So whether you choose one or the other, it's really about your topic, your niche, and your subject matter expertise.
Yeah, I would agree with that. And also your passion. If you want to do a doctoral degree, the one thing you've got to be is absolutely committed to and passionate about the topic. So, follow your passion, and that's certainly going to sustain you in the doctoral journey.
Yes, yes. A couple quick questions we got time for. The next one is, how do we use what we have learned about cybersecurity to improve training for users in a way that will be meaningful and finally help us reduce the risk of having human users on our networks?
Yeah, I think that's through the area of safety tech, online safety technology. For the first time, we've conceptualized scientifically a spectrum of harm, which runs from harassment through to bullying, through to mis and disinformation, through to cyber fraud. And then a whole sector is now conceptualizing solutions to these problems. The problems with online harm and with online criminality is that it has the characteristics of big data: volume, velocity, and variety. In other words, there's a lot of it. And therefore, we need ML and AI solutions. We need to automate the solutions to these problems.
And we're just going to run down one more question, and then we're about out of time here. To which extent do you think we can use human characteristics in the predicting systems of attack?
So there is a lot of good research out there on social engineering tactics, and there's a lot of good public information out there. We can certainly link some, but there are a lot of ways that you can look for, very specific types of attacks. Like if there's financial motivation, if there's data, they're interested in something specific, data, oriented. But there is some good research out there on that.
Yeah, and some of the research I'm currently involved in taps into this in a certain way, where I'm looking at exploring, and we're working on a paper at a moment, exploring malware of choice as evidence of a base personality characteristic. So this is an assumptive leap, okay? So bear with me. So what we know is that there's a strong correlation between classic hostage taking and what's called the dark tetrad, which is a mixture of psychopathic, sadistic, narcissistic, and Machiavellian traits, okay? So to be to hostage take, you need to be, bordering on functioning psychopathy. And effectively, when you see malware, for example, ransomware, then you can make an informed assumption that the perpetrator may be on that spectrum of dark tetrad traits. Why is this useful information? Well, there's no point in pleading with somebody who's got psychopathic traits. My business is going to be destroyed, or it's a hospital, people might die. So you need another sort of like counter measure to deal with that. Equally, we're considering, for example, spyware, creepware, stalkerware, and an assumption that the person might lie on a spectrum of paraphilic traits, for example, voyeurism, because that's their exploit of choice. So that sort of, answers that question in terms of the characteristic exemplified in the tool, if you will, which is classic real-world forensic psychology in terms of what was called signature at a crime scene.
Well, thank you. We've run out of time, so we're going to have to close it off. Dr. Aiken will be putting information in the comments. Dr. Robinson may be doing some as well. They both have books you might want to read. Dr. Aiken's website is available if you lots of information on it, and you can also see them on the captechu.edu website. But we want to thank everybody for being here for this 30 minutes, and take care.